Hey, welcome back to Laurence McKenna channel and welcome to Milan. Beautiful place to come. It's not my favourite Italian city, but it is a lovely Italian city and it is, of course, a classic Champions League tie at this point. It almost feels as if it was written. And the big point for Liverpool this week is there's been a lot of negativity around. I watched the Liverpool game and wasn't particularly impressed with the way that we reacted to the situation in terms of everything that happened around Nottingham Forest. I've already covered that in another video. But I also wasn't then... I can't say I was thrilled about some of the comments that I heard from some of the players and also the manager when it came down to, not that I'm criticising them, but I don't like hearing things like, oh, we shouldn't be losing to Forest. I get it, we shouldn't be losing to Forest. But it comes across in quite a sour sort of negative way sometimes, especially in the way that the press present it. And it's going to give people weapons to try to dislike or take us down at some point, which I think is probably inevitable with someone like Arne Slot. He's a very honest, open speaker and someone who very often says what he's thinking and is quite an honest evaluator of the way that the game was played. Personally, I get it. I get the negativity surrounding that game. We got Nuno'd, and no one's ever happy when another manager, particularly a manager who's known for his tactical ability, outthinks or outdoes a team who is clearly well put together. You would argue superior in technical and physical and mental qualities, even though there were some great qualities within that Nottingham Forest team, and also when it happens at home. All of those things were disappointing, and I appreciate it. Like, you know, in a Michael Jordan sense, you want to react positively. And the AC Milan game is like 50% that, 50% a little bit of a worry that obviously we're playing AC Milan, a team in the Champions League. No one really knows, and I think this is a really key point to make at this point, how the Champions League group, this big system of teams in one league, is going to play out. So they don't know what a win, a draw, and obviously a loss would be really negatively framed within the fan base and outside the fan base, because losing to Milan is probably not something that Liverpool should expect. Maybe a draw is an acceptable result, but even then, I think Liverpool, especially this side with the aspirations they have, would probably be aspiring to beat this Milan team, especially considering that before the Venezia result on the weekend, they had a relatively okay pre-season, but then the three opening games of the season, 2 draws and a loss. And then opening up on Venezia, is that really all that much of an achievement? I guess it's good for momentum, I guess it's good for mentality, I guess it's good for confidence. So we're going to be facing a team that's maybe slightly more confident. And we're also facing them away from home at San Siro. We'll only get the chance to face them once. Obviously another Champions League format again, which I've got to be honest, I'm kind of enjoying. I like the idea of only facing teams once, not getting the opportunity to face them again, not having a team sit back and go, well, maybe if we get a point in this game, we can win in the other one. And frankly, I think it's going to make for more exciting football, which I don't know if it's going to be more open for that very reason. I think on the opening day of the Champions League, especially this big week, where it's like 3 days of Champions League football, we're probably going to want, there's going to be a lot of managers looking for just a result, just looking for a solid start and not to do much more. And I get it, but at the same time, I want Liverpool to start on the front foot. Virgil van Dijk is talking about, it's great to be back, I've missed it. Alisson is talking about performing at the very top level and obviously the volume of games. Again, we're back to volume of games, totally get it. And I think his point about players not being consulted about things is a very valid one. Players very often don't get spoken about or to with the volume of games. But at the same time, we're back in the Champions League. We're at the very top level of football. I think there has to be something done about game scheduling, and there has to be done something about how we treat the players and how we exhaust the players and how we essentially treat them as a commodity, which I'm not particularly a fan of. But at the same time, these are very high-end athletes and they're being paid a lot of money to be in this position. And so I think to an extent, I want to see them perform at their very best. And the Forest game on the weekend was definitely not Liverpool's very best. So I'm not saying volume of games at this point in the season is kind of a silly thing to talk about, but at the same time, if you can see it coming, you know the marathon is there to come, and you've just played a whole summer of football, as a footballer you might get relatively exhausted, or just say, well, where is the real time for us to actually sit down and, rest properly, should we say. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about this Liverpool team. The exciting thing is, obviously, Chiesa is in the squad. Slot said it himself, don't expect him to start the game, but there may be a couple of minutes in there. And I think Liverpool have got a reason to be excited about a player like Chiesa starting again, or possibly getting a run out back in Italy, which means he's going to be feeling relatively at home. I'd imagine he doesn't feel relatively at home in Milan, but being a Juve player is obviously going to be helpful in some capacity. At the same time, I'm also just quite excited to see where we play him, how he plays, what his reaction is. So far, his reaction's been really positive in the way that he is speaking about Liverpool, talking about the institution, talking about coming to the club, his passion for football, his passion for the club, his passion for just playing. I appreciate all of those things. I respect all those things. As a fan, it's lovely to hear. So he's hitting all the right notes in terms of what we want him to say. But at the same time, I think this team, if we're going to rotate our starting, I'll be interested to see if we rotate that starting 11. That's the bigger framing here. The bigger framing here is about starting to move this side towards an actual squad and not just a slot team. Will Chiesa be a big part of that? Who will he sub on for? Is that necessarily indicative of where he's going to play in the future? Are we going to see him played in multiple different positions, which I probably do expect? And if he does come on, are we going to see him do that little rotation thing that Diaz has done with Jota, that Jota has done with Diaz, that we've seen Salah sort of sliding inside a little bit? Will he play in the 10 position? Will he possibly replace someone like a Szoboszlai or someone like that? There's a lot of exciting things around that. And then I just think it's worth saying, McAllister didn't play a full 90 on the weekend. I still think Ryan Gravenberch had a pretty good game. I think the real thing that they exploited was getting between the double pivot and our defensive line. And I actually thought the substitutions were pretty good substitutions. In terms of the idea behind them, not in terms of the execution, you could clearly see that some of the players all the players knew what they were doing. There was clearly a game plan there. But I'm slightly concerned that tonight against a team like Milan, clearly a very strong squad, clearly technically brilliant, clearly want to make an impact on the opening day of the Champions League at home for their own fans. Are we going to see them sit back, play a little more of an Italian style, be a little more defensive, try and hit Liverpool on the counter, which is definitely something they're capable of doing? And are we going to see them, essentially here, Liverpool are the bigger or the more established of the two sides at this point, especially considering where we finished last season, considering our standing in the Champions League and the seeding where we're at. It's very different to where AC Milan are at the moment. And you can say, well, there'll be more recent form, whatever. No disrespect to AC Milan, but they're in a position where they haven't been as powerful as they were for a little while, probably under Berlusconi. And we're going to see really where both teams are at. I mean, I'm at the moment making something for EA about the ratings of the Liverpool team. And on the weekend, before the game against Forest, I had two videos. One was about the confidence that I have in the team and how the ratings maybe feel accurate to maybe just a little bit low. And the other one was at some point Liverpool will get out-tacticked by another manager. They will have someone who's going to outthink Slot, who's going to find a tactic to undermine what Liverpool are doing because it's so early on in the project. And this knee-jerk reaction of, if we can't win against Forest, then who can we win against? Is this guy really good enough? I think you forget, a lot of people, and loads of people had this knee-jerk reaction of, we needed to buy more players, blah, blah, blah. I genuinely think we're beaten tactically, and it wasn't a thing that we had to do with personnel. I get we would have different personnel if we'd signed someone, but genuinely, if say we'd signed Zubimendi, another winger, and a left-back, do you think Zubimendi changes the control that we have in that game? Maybe Zubimendi is the difference. But that wasn't down to us not having the budget to get Zubimendi. That was down to Zubimendi wanting to stay in Real Sociedad. That's not a failure on Liverpool's part. That is a triumph on Sociedad's part. And it seems if the relations between the two clubs are still relatively positive, so I'll see where that one evolves. I'm just saying, I think there's a bit of a negative spin on the fan base at the moment. And what tends to happen is when you say something on the channel like, we can do something positive even with this team, people go, well, you said we didn't need any more signings. It's not necessarily what I'm saying. Of course, I'd always love to see new signings within the team. But what I would love to see is more people not just saying, FSG are terrible owners, all these kind of things. Of course, there are flaws in every ownership. Of course, there is an issue and balances you have to make in every club. We're not Real Madrid. We're not Manchester United. We could be the financial powerhouse of those. We're building up towards those. But you have to be financially smart until you get to that level. And I'm not saying that therefore we can't spend. But I'm saying spend properly and get someone we actually want rather than just getting a signing which appeases some people because of the narrative that they think is there. I think it's better to be level-headed as a fan base, or at least try to give your team the benefit of the doubt rather than these knee-jerk reactions that we seem to be having right now. And a lot of people in my comments were sort of quite angry saying, you said we didn't need to make any signings. That wasn't it was one of the points I was making in terms of, but it wasn't the core point of if we have no signings, what is it that we then are going to do? I think this Liverpool team, again, is going to try and control things against Milan. I think they're very capable of controlling things against Milan. I think that midfield pivot of Gravenberch and McAllister will start. I imagine that Szoboszlai will probably start ahead of that as well. It'd be hard to see someone else sort of in the team starting ahead of him, especially considering we don't have Harvey Elliott right now. I don't know. Curtis Jones might play a 10. I'll be interested to see if Curtis Jones could play a 10. He's certainly creative enough, but does he have the running? Does he have the legs? And it's interesting, actually, talking about Szoboszlai. Arne Slot himself said there is that player in there. There is a world-class player, but he isn't quite that world-class player yet. It's so interesting to see that. I think a lot of people are saying, you know, Szoboszlai has definitely got the technical ability, the mentality, and the application. But what is it that we'll see from there? I think Milan are gonna try and play a little defensive and hits on the counter, if I'm quite honest. I think that's supported in Italy. I think it's much more acceptable for them to do than it would be, say, for Manchester United or someone else like that to do that. And I also think it's much more acceptable for them because, guess what? They're a team who see themselves as the underdogs punching up at Liverpool now, whereas a few years ago, that was a reversed role. 20 years ago now, that was a reversed role. So, wow, that was 20 years ago. Can you believe that? I mean, some of you might not even know about that, the Istanbul game, but big history there, incredible history there between Inter, AC, Liverpool, and this city in general. Liverpool obviously losing to Inter, but also having some big games against Inter. Facchetti scoring that incredible goal. The possible corruption in some of those matches, and of course Istanbul as a final, and then of course Athens as a final just a couple of years later as well. There's been some monumental, historic ties between these two teams, and so I'm kind of excited to see where the relations are between the two. I think Liverpool and AC Milan historically have pretty good relationships, so I'll be interested to see how they accept us in the city. I think I'm sitting with the AC Milan fans tonight. Yeah, someone bought me a ticket. It's the way it is. I'm sorry. But I'll look forward to seeing you guys again. If you're in the city, get at me. Instagram DMs, wherever else it is. I'll be outside the stadium talking to people beforehand. I look forward to chatting to you guys. If you are here, come talk to me. I personally think one loss does not make a pie. And maybe we are still a few ingredients short of challenging. But I'll be interested to see where we get to. Let me just check my notes because I want to make sure I cover everything for you guys. Yeah, that's everything. Forest was disappointing. Hopefully Milan is the rebound. Tactically, I think we're going to play the same team. I mean, I don't think it'll be the same system. I think we're going to expect them to counter on us. So I'd imagine that we're going to spread the wingers just a little bit more. Mohamed Salah will come inside. Trent's going to try and flex a little bit more if they're going to be a little bit deeper. I think we'll probably see Andy Robertson be super aggressive. I love that inside like winger role that he played, the underlapping role that he played. We're seeing small tactical adjustments that Slot makes to overload in a certain place. And I think on the weekend we were a couple of, one move away. There was that final ball, I don't know, call it a sloppiness, but like they were cutting off our passing lanes and it confused us a little bit, threw us off. Maybe Milan will be the same. But at the same time, I'm not sure Milan are the same as Forest. Does that make sense? Like, Milan are not going to apply themselves in the same way as Forest did. And I think, tactically, we've got the edge. I'm going to go 2-1 to Liverpool. Still think Milan have got a goal in them because it's San Siro. But I want to see a win. I will chat to you guys post-game on this channel, and I'll see you in a while. Much love.